The wagon will turn
You're not gonna
once,
stop
then
me?
stopped. Clara Bennett
Because if
grabbed
you
the side
stay,
rail and stared at
I want it
Ethan
to be
Cole
because you
standing
chose
beside
to.
the hitching post, the wagon key held loosely between two fingers. "Where is the key?" she asked. Ethan slipped it into his coat pocket. "You're not leaving tonight." Clara stepped down from the wagon. "That wasn't the agreement." "I know. 3 days," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I came here for 3 days of work. 3 days. Not a week. Not a month." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And I'm not asking you to stay forever." "Then give me the key." He looked at her, silent. Behind him, the ranch house stood quiet beneath the fading evening light. Clara took one step closer. "Ethan," he finally said, "just give me until morning." Clara stared at him. She had spent too many years learning what happened when she trusted a promise from a man. "Why?" she asked. Ethan opened his mouth, but no answer came. That silence frightened her more than the locked wagon ever could. 3 days earlier, Clara had arrived at the ranch with one small trunk, a worn coat, and no intention of becoming part of anyone's life. She had taken the job because it paid enough to get her through another month. That was all. She had made that clear before she ever stepped onto Ethan's property. The ranch sat several miles beyond Dry Creek, surrounded by open grassland, weathered fences, and cottonwoods gathered along a narrow creek. Ethan had met her at the road that morning, hat low over his eyes, sleeves rolled to his forearms. "You're Clara Bennett?" "Yes." He looked at her trunk. "That all you brought?" "I'm only staying 3 days." His eyes lifted to hers. "I heard." She had expected him to laugh. He didn't. "Kitchen's inside," he said. "You'll have a room in the house." Clara stopped. "I thought you said this was 3 days of work." "It is." "Then I don't need a room." Ethan glanced toward the road. "The nearest boarding house is 15 miles. I've slept farther from a kitchen than that." A faint change crossed his face. "I figured you might say that." He took her trunk before she could object. "Come on." Clara followed him toward the house. She did not like being helped. She liked being watched even less. Every job she had taken in the last few years had taught her the same lesson. Keep your stays short, do your work well, and leave before anyone has a reason to regret hiring you. It was easier that way. No questions. No promises. No goodbyes. Inside the ranch house, Ethan showed her the kitchen. The room was larger than she expected, with a cast-iron stove, a long wooden table, and shelves filled with jars of beans, flour, coffee, and dried fruit. "You'll find most of what you need here," he said. "If you don't, tell me." Clara set down her bag. "I can make do." "I figured you could." She looked at him. "You don't say much, do you?" "Not unless there's something worth saying." Clara almost smiled. "Almost. Then we'll get along." Ethan left her alone. For the first time that morning, Clara breathed freely. She unpacked only what she needed. 3 days. She repeated the number in her mind as she began preparing supper. 3 days meant she could work hard, collect her pay, and continue south before anyone learned enough about her to ask her to stay. By sunset, the kitchen smelled of beans, biscuits, and roasted beef. Ethan returned from the pasture with dust on his boots. He stopped at the doorway and looked toward the stove. "Smells good." "It's food." "Still smells good." Clara placed a plate on the table. "You have one ranch hand." "Two." "They'll be hungry." "They always are." She glanced toward the door. "Where are they?" "Finishing up." Ethan sat. Clara remained standing. "You eat too," he said. "I'll eat later." "Why?" "Because I cooked it." Ethan looked at the empty chair across from him. "That doesn't mean you have to eat alone." Clara hesitated, then sat. It was a small thing, barely anything. But when Ethan pushed the breadbasket toward her without a word, she noticed. Over the next 3 days, the ranch slowly became easier to move through. Clara learned which floorboard creaked outside the kitchen, which horse kicked at strangers, and which shelf Ethan always forgot to restock. She learned that he drank coffee black and spoke to horses more gently than he spoke to people. Ethan learned that Clara could make biscuits without measuring flour, that she hated being praised, and that she never left a dish in the sink overnight. Neither asked why the other was so careful. On the third afternoon, Clara packed her trunk. She counted her wages twice and tied the money inside her coat. Then she walked toward the barn. The wagon stood ready near the gate. Her trunk was already loaded. Ethan was nowhere in sight. Clara climbed into the driver's seat and reached beneath the bench for the key. Her fingers found nothing. She checked again. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan stood beside the wagon. His hand rested against his coat pocket. Clara slowly climbed down. Where is the key? He looked at her, and this time, he did not answer. Clara's eyes stayed fixed on Ethan's coat pocket. You took it. Ethan did not deny it. I did. She let out a short breath that sounded more like disbelief than anger. Why? Because you were leaving before I could talk to you. Then you should have talked. You're right. Clara folded her arms. Give me the key. Ethan reached into his pocket, but instead of handing it over, he held it in his palm. You said 3 days. I worked 3 days. I know. You paid me. I did. Then there's nothing left between us. The words came too quickly. Ethan's expression tightened. There's more work. Clara shook her head. Not the kind I came for. He looked toward the barn. One of the horses stamped against the stall floor. The north fence came down in last night's wind. Then hire someone. I can. Good. She held out her hand. Key. Ethan looked at her open palm. The road is washed out. Clara glanced toward the horizon. It hasn't rained since dawn. There's a creek crossing. I've crossed creeks before. Not this one. She stepped closer. Are you trying to frighten me into staying? No, then what are you doing? Ethan's eyes met hers. Trying to make sure you get there safely. Clara stared at him. For a moment, the anger in her face weakened. Then she remembered the missing key. You could have said that. I should have. Yes. Ethan finally placed the key in her hand. Clara closed her fingers around it, but she did not climb back into the wagon. Where is the creek? She asked. Ethan pointed beyond the pasture. About half a mile past the cottonwoods. And the bridge. There isn't one. You expect me to wait for the water to fall? Until morning. Clara looked at the sky. The sun was already sinking. She hated that he had a reasonable answer. She hated even more that he had given the key back without making her fight for it. Fine, she said. I'll leave at first light. Ethan nodded. All right. He turned away. That's it? Clara asked. He stopped. What else? You stole my key, stopped me from leaving, and now you're just going to walk away? I gave it back. That doesn't explain anything. Ethan looked at her. I didn't want you to go angry. Clara's breath caught. I wasn't angry when I arrived. I know. Then why did you care? He was quiet long enough that Clara thought he might not answer. Because you looked like you were running from something. Her face hardened. You don't know me. No, Ethan nodded once. That's true. Then don't decide what I'm running from. I won't. He walked toward the barn. Clara watched him go. She hated that his words had followed her inside. She hated that he had seen something she worked hard to hide. She carried the key into the kitchen and placed it beside her wages. 3 days. She had done exactly what she promised. Yet instead of packing her trunk, she found herself looking through the pantry shelves, counting supplies for the next morning. She told herself it was practical. The road was washed out. The ranch hands needed breakfast. There was no reason to leave before sunrise. That was all. She started a pot of beans. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared in the doorway. You're cooking? Apparently. You don't have to. I know. He watched her for a moment. Thank you. Clara stirred the pot. Don't thank me yet. He almost smiled. Fair enough. The ranch hands came in after dark, muddy and tired. Clara served them supper. One of them, an older man named Amos, looked at the table and then at Ethan. Thought she was leaving. Clara stiffened. Ethan answered calmly. She is. In the morning. Amos nodded. Road ought to be passable by then. Clara looked at Ethan. He did not meet her eyes. After supper, she went outside to check the wagon. The key was still in her pocket. She touched it through the fabric. The wagon waited under the cottonwoods, ready to carry her away. Behind her, the ranch house glowed warmly through the windows. She could hear laughter from inside. Someone had left the kitchen door open. Clara stood between the wagon and the house, uncertain which direction felt more like freedom. The next morning, she woke before dawn. Her trunk was packed again. She dressed, carried it outside, and loaded it into the wagon. Ethan was already in the yard. He watched without speaking. Clara climbed into the driver's seat and held up the key. I kept it this time. Good. You're not going to stop me? Ethan shook his head. No. She looked at him carefully. Why? He stepped closer to the wagon. Because if you stay, I want it to be because you chose to. Clara stared at him. The words unsettled her more than his earlier attempt to keep the key. She slipped the key into the lock, but before turning it, she looked back at the ranch house. 3 days had been enough to earn her wages. They should have been enough to leave. Yet something inside her had begun asking a question she did not want to hear. What if leaving was no longer the easiest choice? Clara turned the wagon key, but did not pull the reins. The horse shifted beneath her, impatient to move, while the ranch house stood behind her in the pale morning light. Ethan remained several feet away, giving her exactly the distance he had promised. "You really won't stop me?" she asked. "No." Clara looked down at the key in her hand. Yesterday, she had been furious that he took it. Today, having it back somehow made the choice harder. She turned the key once more, then stopped. "Why does it matter to you whether I leave?" Ethan's eyes stayed on hers. "Because I noticed when you weren't at the table." Clara swallowed. "That's not an answer. It's the truth." She studied him, searching for pressure, guilt, or some hidden bargain. There was none. That unsettled her more than anything. "I came here for 3 days," she said quietly. "I know. I told you that from the beginning." "You did. Then why do I feel like I'm the one breaking a promise if I leave?" Ethan stepped closer, but stopped before reaching the wagon. "Because maybe you made a promise to yourself before you came here." Clara's fingers tightened around the reins. "What promise?" "That you'd never stay anywhere long enough to need it." She went still. The words landed with uncomfortable precision. "You don't know anything about my life." "No," Ethan lowered his voice. "But I know what it looks like when someone keeps one foot pointed toward the road." Clara looked away. Beyond the pasture, the creek flashed silver under the morning sun. The road to Dry Creek was open now. Nothing physically kept her there. That was the problem. She could leave. She simply could not explain why she had not. Ethan walked toward the barn. "I'll have the north gate checked before noon." Clara watched him go. "Ethan." He stopped. "What? Did you really hide the key because you thought the road was unsafe?" He turned. "Partly." "What was the other part?" His expression changed, almost too slightly to notice. "I wanted one more night to talk to you." Clara waited. "And you didn't?" "I tried. You took my key." "I know. That wasn't talking." "I know that too." A reluctant smile touched the corner of her mouth. "You're not very good at this." "I'm learning." He disappeared into the barn. Clara remained in the wagon until the horse lowered its head and tugged gently at the reins. "You're impatient too," she murmured. She climbed down. Instead of driving away, she carried her trunk back toward the house. It felt like surrender, and yet nothing about the movement felt forced. Ethan was repairing a gate when she found him. He looked up. His eyes moved from her face to the trunk in her hand. "You're staying?" Clara set the trunk down. "For one more day?" He nodded. "All right. Don't look so pleased." "I'm not." "You are." "Maybe a little." She shook her head, but she was smiling. That afternoon, Ethan took her beyond the cottonwoods to inspect the damaged fence. Clara had expected him to tell her to stay out of the work. Instead, he handed her a coil of wire. "Can you hold this?" "I can do more than hold wire." I suspected. They worked side by side. The sun climbed high, and dust clung to Clara's skirt. Ethan showed her how to twist the wire tight without cutting her palm. When she managed it herself, he nodded once. "Good. That's all. You want applause?" "Maybe. You did well." Clara laughed. "That will have to do." At noon, they rested beneath the shade of a cottonwood. Ethan passed her a tin cup of water. She drank, then looked toward the ranch. "You built all this yourself?" "Mostly." "Why?" "It was here." "That's not an answer." He glanced at the fields. "My father left me the land. I stayed because somebody had to." Clara looked at him. "And now?" Ethan was quiet. "Now I'm not sure staying is enough." She waited, but he did not explain. A gust moved through the leaves above them. Clara looked at the worn hat in his hands. "I understand that feeling." Ethan turned toward her. "Do you?" She nodded. "I've spent years staying where I was needed, but never where I was wanted." His eyes softened. "That's different." "Yes." She traced a line in the dirt with her boot. "It makes leaving easier." Ethan did not argue. Instead, he said, "Maybe." That evening, Clara found a small wooden chair beside the kitchen table. She had not noticed it before. "Where did this come from?" she asked. Ethan looked over from the stove. "It was in the barn." "Why bring it inside?" He shrugged. "There wasn't enough room at the table before." Clara touched the back of the chair. "For whom?" Ethan met her eyes. "I don't know yet." Her breath caught. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Clara slowly pulled the chair out and sat. Ethan set 2 cups of coffee on the table. "You staying another night?" She looked at the chair beneath her. "I think I am." Outside, the ranch settled into evening silence. But for the first time, Clara did not hear that silence as a warning. She heard it as something waiting to become home. By the next morning, Clara had stopped telling herself she was only staying one more day. She still had her wages tucked inside her coat and her trunk beneath the bed, but the urgency that had followed her since arriving at the ranch had begun to loosen. She woke before sunrise, dressed quietly, and walked into the kitchen to find Ethan already there,
And you just
pouring
let me
coffee
go?
into 2 tin cups.
I would let you
He looked over
choose.
his shoulder. Morning. Clara took the cup he held out. You remembered. You take it black. She raised an eyebrow. You notice a lot. I told you that. She sat at the table. The new wooden chair remained beside her. You made this. I repaired it. For me. Ethan sat across from her. I didn't say that. Clara smiled. You didn't have to. For a few minutes, they drank their coffee in silence. It was not uncomfortable. Clara found herself surprised by that. Silence had always meant distance to her. Here, it seemed to mean there was no need to fill every empty space with words. After breakfast, Ethan asked if she would help him sort the pantry supplies. Clara agreed. She counted flour sacks, checked jars, and made a list of what needed replacing. Ethan leaned against the door while she worked. You're reorganizing everything again. Your shelves make no sense. They made sense to me. That's because you're the only one who uses them. He smiled. Fair point. Clara placed the last jar on the upper shelf. There. Now you can find things. I could find them before. Not without looking for 10 minutes. Ethan laughed softly. Clara turned toward him. Did you just laugh at me? No, you did. Maybe. She smiled despite herself. The morning passed quickly. After lunch, Ethan took her to the north pasture to check the fence they had repaired the day before. Clara followed him through the grass, her skirt gathered slightly above her boots. The fence stood firm now. Ethan tested one of the posts. Good enough. Clara folded her arms. You sound disappointed. I was hoping it would fall again. She gave him a look. You're getting sarcastic. I've been around you too long. It's been 4 days. Ethan looked at her. Exactly. She laughed. They walked back toward the ranch together. Near the creek, Clara stopped. A patch of wildflowers had grown beside the water. She crouched and touched one pale yellow bloom. I used to pick these when I was little. Ethan stopped beside her. Where? Everywhere. She pulled the flower free, then immediately looked guilty. Sorry. It's a flower. Still. Ethan watched her turn it between her fingers. You don't like taking things that aren't yours. Not without permission. That explains the way you look at the house. Clara glanced at him. What do you mean? Like you're waiting for someone to tell you to leave. She looked down at the flower. Maybe I am. Ethan's voice was gentle. Nobody's going to. Clara's fingers tightened around the stem. You can't promise that. No, he paused. But I can promise I won't ask you to leave because you stopped being useful. Clara looked at him sharply. The words reached deeper than he could have known. She turned toward the creek. People usually like you as long as you're useful. That hasn't been my experience. You're a rancher. People need you. That doesn't mean they know me. She looked at him. Do you want them to? Ethan considered it. Some days. Clara smiled faintly. And other days? Other days. I'd rather have one person who does. The breeze moved between them. Clara looked away before he could see what his words had done. That evening, she prepared supper. She made stew, fresh biscuits, and fried apples. Ethan came in from the barn with dirt on his sleeves. Clara handed him a plate. Sit. You sound like you own the place. She froze for half a second. Then Ethan added, Not that I mind. Clara smiled. Good. They ate together at the kitchen table. For the first time, Clara noticed that Ethan had placed the repaired wooden chair directly beside his own. Lucy was not there. Ethan's young niece, who sometimes visited from Dry Creek, had gone home that afternoon. The empty place should have felt ordinary. Instead, Clara kept looking at it. What? Ethan asked. Nothing. You keep staring at that chair. Clara looked down at her plate. I was thinking. Dangerous. She laughed. I was thinking about the first day. When you told me 3 days? Yes. You're still counting? No, Ethan's smile faded into something softer. Good. Clara looked at him. I don't know when I stopped. Stopped what? Counting. Ethan did not answer. He reached across the table and moved the bread basket closer to her. Maybe that's a good thing. Later, Clara returned to her room and opened her trunk. Her clothes were still folded inside, ready for the road. She touched the carpet bag handle and sat on the edge of the bed. She could leave tomorrow. The wagon key was on the small table beside the door. Ethan had given it back. He had not hidden it again. The choice was completely hers. Clara stood, walked to the window, and looked across the dark yard. A light burned in the kitchen. Ethan was still there, cleaning the stove. He glanced toward the window as though he could feel her watching. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither moved. Then Clara looked down at the key in her hand. She could leave in the morning. But for the first time, the thought did not feel like freedom. It felt like walking away from something she had only just begun to understand. Clara woke before dawn and found the wagon key still on the small table beside her bed. She picked it up, turned it once in her fingers, then set it down again. The decision seemed to follow her into the kitchen. By the time Ethan came in, she had already started breakfast. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." "I have work." Clara glanced at him. "So do I." He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. For a moment, neither mentioned the key. Then Ethan said, "You can leave whenever you're ready." Clara's hand paused over the biscuit dough. "I know. I mean it. I know that too." He nodded and said nothing more. Somehow, that made it easier to breathe. After breakfast, a rider arrived from Dry Creek with a small stack of letters and a newspaper. One envelope was addressed to Clara. She recognized the handwriting before opening it. Her former employer in town had heard she was working at Ethan's ranch and wanted to know whether she would return the following week. The wages were steady. The boarding house room was available. It was exactly the kind of offer Clara had spent years waiting for. She folded the letter carefully. Ethan noticed. Something wrong. No good news. Clara looked toward the window. Maybe. He did not ask what was inside. She appreciated that. She had grown tired of men asking questions because they expected answers they could use. Ethan simply went back to repairing a leather strap. Clara watched his hands for a moment. "You really don't want to know? If you want to tell me, you will." Most people would ask. "I'm not most people." A faint smile touched her face. "No, you aren't." Later that afternoon, Clara walked into town alone. She needed flour and wanted to clear her head. Dry Creek was small enough that everyone seemed to know when someone new arrived. Mrs. Harper stopped her outside the mercantile. "Heard you're still at the coal ranch." Clara adjusted the basket on her arm. "For now. Thought you were only there 3 days." "So did I." Mrs. Harper smiled knowingly. Ethan can be persuasive. Clara's expression cooled. "He didn't make me stay, didn't he?" Clara looked directly at her. No, the woman seemed surprised. "Then why are you still there?" Clara opened her mouth, but no easy answer came. "I'm working." Mrs. Harper glanced at the basket. "Of course." Clara walked away before the conversation could become something she did not want. At the edge of town, she stopped beside the hitching rail. She looked back toward the ranch road. She could accept the job in Dry Creek. She could earn steady money. She could have a room of her own. It was sensible, safe, familiar. Yet the word familiar no longer sounded comforting. When she returned to the ranch, Ethan was repairing a section of porch railing. He looked up. "You were gone a while." "I went to town." "Everything all right?" Clara set the flour on the kitchen table. "I was offered another job." Ethan lowered the hammer. "Do you want it?" "I don't know." "Then don't decide today." Clara studied him. "You make everything sound simple." "Some things are." "Not this." Ethan set the hammer down. "What makes it difficult?" Clara looked toward the doorway. "The job is better money." "All right." "And the room is closer to town." "All right." "And nobody there expects me to stay." Ethan was silent. Clara realized what she had said. "That matters to you?" he asked. "It used to." "And now?" She folded her arms. "Now I'm not sure whether being wanted is something I should be afraid of." Ethan's face softened. "You shouldn't have to be." She looked away. "People want things in return." "I know. You wanted me to stay." "I did." "Why?" Ethan took a breath. "Because I like having you here." Clara's heart beat faster. "That's all." "No," he looked at her. "But it's where I start." She held his gaze. "And if I leave? Then I'll be disappointed." "Angry." "No, bitter." "No." Ethan stepped closer. "I'd rather miss you than keep you somewhere you don't want to be." Clara looked down. The simplicity of it hurt. She had expected conditions all her life. She had never learned what to do with kindness that asked for nothing. That evening, Clara placed the Dry Creek letter beside the wagon key. 2 choices. One promised independence. The other offered uncertainty. Neither could be chosen for her. She went to the kitchen and found Ethan setting 2 plates on the table. "Dinner?" he asked. Clara nodded. She pulled out the wooden chair beside him. "Dinner." Ethan sat across from her. For several minutes, they ate without speaking. Then Clara reached for the bread and passed it to him first. He looked at her hand, then at her face. What? She asked. Nothing. But his smile told her otherwise. Outside, the wagon waited beneath the darkening sky, its key no longer hidden. Clara knew she could leave in the morning. The difference was that now, she was beginning to wonder whether staying might be a choice worth making. The next morning, Clara carried the Dry Creek letter and the wagon key to the kitchen table. She placed them side by side and stared at them while the coffee simmered. One offered certainty. The other opened a road she was no longer sure she wanted to take. Ethan entered without a word, his boots still damp from the morning grass. His eyes went to the table. You made a decision? Clara looked at him. Not yet. He nodded. All right. She frowned. That's all. What else should I say? You could tell me what you want. Ethan leaned against the counter. You already know. Clara looked down at the letter. I want to hear you say it. He was quiet for a moment. I want you to stay. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Why? Because the house feels different when you're here. That's not enough. No, Ethan stepped closer. It's because I look for you when I come through that door. Because I hear you moving around the kitchen before I see you. Because when something happens during the day, I find myself thinking about what you would say. Clara swallowed. And I don't want you to be here because you need a job. His voice softened. I want you here because you want to be. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You make it difficult to leave. I'm not trying to. I know. She folded the letter carefully. That's what makes it difficult. Ethan did not touch her. He simply waited. Clara walked to the window and looked toward the wagon. When I was 17, my father lost the farm. Ethan remained silent. We had debts. People came for the horses first, then the cattle, then the furniture. My mother kept telling me we would start over somewhere else. Clara smiled faintly. We did. More than once. She turned back toward him. Every place after that was temporary. Every room. Every job. I learned not to unpack everything because sooner or later, something changed. Ethan's expression softened. So you keep your trunk ready. Clara nodded. Always. He glanced toward the hallway. You don't have to unpack it today. What? Your trunk. He stepped toward the table. Leave it where it is. Take another day. Then another, if you want. Clara laughed softly through the ache in her throat. You make staying sound like a series of small choices. Maybe that's all it is. She looked at him. And if I choose wrong, then you leave. You really mean that? Yes. Clara touched the wagon key. Even after hiding this. Ethan gave a rueful smile. Especially after that. She shook her head. You're impossible. I've been told. Before either could say more, a sharp crack came from the barn. Ethan turned immediately. A horse whinnied. He grabbed his hat and headed outside. Clara followed. At the barn, one of the younger horses had kicked through a loose stall board. A section of wood had fallen inward, and the animal was backing against the corner, frightened and restless. Stay back, Ethan said. Clara stopped at the doorway. Can you get him out? If he settles down. Ethan approached slowly, speaking in a low voice. The horse tossed its head. Ethan paused, then extended one hand. Clara watched his shoulders relax. After a moment, the horse lowered its head. Ethan reached for the halter and guided it toward the open side of the stall. Easy, he murmured. The horse stepped forward. Clara released the breath she had been holding. Ethan secured the animal and examined the broken board. He's not hurt. Good. Ethan looked at her. You all right? Yes. You looked scared. Clara gave him a small smile. I was worried about the horse. I know. Something about the way he said it made her look away. They repaired the stall together. Clara held the board while Ethan hammered the nails back into place. Their hands brushed once. Neither pulled away immediately. Later, they ate lunch outside beneath the cottonwoods. Clara brought sandwiches and coffee. Ethan looked at the basket. You didn't have to bring lunch. I know. You say that a lot. Because you say things that don't need saying. He smiled. Clara handed him a sandwich. There. He took it. Thank you. She watched him eat. Ethan. Yes. If I stay, I don't want to be your cook forever. He looked at her. What do you want? I don't know yet. Then we'll figure it out. She studied him. If you want. Clara smiled. I think I do. That evening, Clara returned to her room and opened her trunk. For years, she had packed it as though every departure might come before sunrise. This time, she removed one dress and hung it in the wardrobe. Then another. She folded her coat and placed it in the bottom drawer. Finally, she lifted the trunk from beside the bed and pushed it against the wall. It was not empty. It was simply no longer waiting by the door. When she came downstairs, Ethan was standing near the kitchen table. He noticed the missing trunk, but said nothing. Clara walked to the stove. "What's for dinner?" "I was about to ask you." "Then ask." He smiled. "What are we having?" Clara looked at him. "Whatever you catch." "That sounds dangerous." "You'll survive." They laughed. Outside, the wagon remained ready beneath the cottonwoods. The key rested in Clara's pocket. She could still leave. But now the choice was no longer between a ranch and a road. It was between the life she had always known and the possibility of becoming part of something she had never dared to trust. The following morning, Clara found Ethan at the corral before breakfast, tightening the last section of the repaired gate. She leaned against the fence and watched him work. "You know," she said, "most men would hire someone for that." Ethan glanced over. "Most men have more money than time. And you?" "I have a ranch." Clara smiled. That wasn't an answer. It was the one I had. She stepped through the gate. "Need help?" Ethan handed her a length of rope. "Hold this." She took it. "You really trust me with everything now?" "Not everything." "What don't you trust me with?" He looked at her for a moment. "The kitchen." Clara laughed. Too late. They finished the repair together, then walked toward the house as the morning sun spread across the pasture. Clara noticed how naturally she had begun matching her steps to his. She had never meant to learn the rhythm of this place. Somehow she had. At breakfast, Ethan unfolded the newspaper and glanced over an advertisement for a ranch hand looking for work in a neighboring county. Clara watched him. "You need another hand?" "Maybe." "Then hire one." Ethan lowered the paper. "Why?" "Because you're doing too much yourself." "I manage." "That's not the same as being all right." Ethan studied her. "You worry about me now?" Clara looked down at her coffee. "I suppose I do." The admission seemed to surprise them both. After breakfast, Ethan left for the south pasture. Clara stayed behind to finish the washing. She was hanging clothes near the back porch when she heard hoofbeats. A stranger rode through the gate and stopped near the house. "Is Ethan Cole here?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "He's out in the south pasture." The man looked at her. "You Clara Bennett?" She stiffened. "Yes." He pulled an envelope from his coat. "Got this from Dry Creek." Clara took it. The seal was broken. Her former employer had written again. The job in town was still available, but only until the end of the week. The writer watched her face. "You planning to take it?" Clara folded the letter. "I don't know." He shrugged. "Town could use someone who knows how to run a kitchen." Then he rode away. Clara stood alone in the yard. The letter suddenly felt heavier than it had before. That afternoon, Ethan returned with dust covering his boots and sleeves. He saw the envelope in her hand. "More news." Clara nodded. "The job is still mine if I want it." Ethan removed his hat. "How long?" "Until the end of the week." He looked at her, then toward the wagon. "That gives you time." Clara frowned. "You're not going to ask me to stay?" "No, not even now. Especially now." She folded the letter tighter. "Why?" Ethan rested his hands on the fence rail. "Because I meant what I said. If you stay, it has to be your choice." Clara stepped closer. "What if I choose to leave?" "Then I'll help load your trunk." Her eyes stung unexpectedly. "And you just let me go?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "I would let you choose." Clara looked away. "You make that sound easy." "It isn't." She turned back. "Then why do it?" Ethan looked directly at her. "Because I care about you more than I care about getting my way." Clara went still. He did not move toward her. He did not ask for an answer. He simply stood there, giving her the space he had promised. That night, Clara sat alone at the kitchen table. The Dry Creek letter lay beside the wagon key. She picked up the key and rolled it between her fingers. The first time Ethan had hidden it, she had been furious. Now the metal felt different in her hand. It no longer represented something taken from her. It represented a door she was free to open. The next morning, she woke with a decision. She dressed, carried her trunk outside, and placed it beside the wagon. Ethan was repairing a bridle near the barn. He looked up, but said nothing. Clara walked toward him. "I'm going to town." His expression changed, though he kept his voice steady. "All right. I need to speak to someone." "All right. I'll be back before supper." Ethan stopped what he was doing. "You're coming back?" Clara gave him a small smile. "If that's all right." He nodded slowly. "It is." She turned toward the wagon, then stopped. "Ethan." "Yes." "I'm not ready to promise forever." He looked at her. "I'm not asking for forever." Clara smiled. "Good." She climbed into the wagon, But before taking the reins, she looked back at him. For the first time, leaving the ranch did not feel like leaving. It felt like going somewhere and knowing she had a place to return to. Ethan watched until the wagon disappeared down the road. Then he looked toward the house. The door stood open. On the kitchen table, Clara had left her coffee cup beside his. Clara reached Dry Creek just before noon. She tied the wagon outside the mercantile and carried the letter inside, though she already knew what she intended to say. Mrs. Harper looked up from behind the counter. "You came back." Clara nodded. "I need to speak with Mr. Dawson." The woman studied her. "About the kitchen job?" "Yes." Mr. Dawson appeared from the back room a few minutes later. Clara handed him the letter. "I'm grateful for the offer," she said, "but I can't take it." He read the letter, then looked at her. "You sure?" Clara thought of the ranch house, the wooden chair, the repaired fence, and Ethan standing in the yard without once asking her to stay. "Yes." "Because of Cole?" Clara shook her head. "Because of me." Mr. Dawson nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He folded the letter. "If you ever change your mind, come see me." "Thank you." Clara stepped outside with a strange lightness in her chest. She had expected regret. Instead, she felt as though she had finally made a choice without someone else making it for her. She climbed into the wagon and turned toward the ranch. The road seemed shorter on the way back. When she reached the gate, Ethan was in the pasture with one of the ranch hands. He looked up as the wagon approached. Clara stopped near the porch and climbed down. Ethan walked toward her. "You're back early. I finished in town." He glanced at the wagon. "And?" Clara held his gaze. "I turned down the job." He was silent. "Say something," she said. "I'm trying not to say too much." "Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I'm afraid I'll say something that makes you think you owe me an explanation." Clara stepped closer. "You don't need to be afraid of that. I'm learning." She smiled. "So am I." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Did you leave your trunk in the wagon?" No, his eyes moved toward the house. "You moved it inside?" "Yesterday. I noticed." Clara laughed softly. "Of course you did." They stood there beneath the afternoon sun, neither knowing what to say next. Finally, Ethan reached for the wagon reins. "Come on." "Where?" "I need to check the south pasture." "You need me?" "I'd like the company." Clara climbed into the wagon beside him. They rode together toward the far field. The ranch stretched wide around them, green grass bending beneath the wind, fence posts casting long shadows across the ground. Clara looked toward the hills. "I never thought I'd stay this long." Ethan kept his eyes on the trail. "Neither did I." "You expected me to leave?" "At first. And now." He paused. "Now I expect you to tell me what you want." Clara looked at him. "I want to learn how to ride properly." He glanced at her. "That's what you want. Today." "All right." They stopped near the south pasture. Ethan helped her down and led a calm chestnut mare toward the fence. "She's gentle." Clara looked at the horse. "You sure?" "She likes people who don't rush her." Clara touched the mare's neck. "Sounds familiar." Ethan smiled. He showed Clara where to place her foot and how to settle into the saddle without pulling the reins. She climbed up awkwardly and immediately gripped the saddle horn. "Don't laugh." "I'm not." "You are." "A little." She tried again. This time she found her balance. Ethan walked beside the horse as Clara guided it slowly across the pasture. "You're doing fine." "That's your favorite phrase." "It works." She looked down at him. "What if I fall?" "I'll catch the horse." "Not me." "You'll land in the grass." Clara laughed. Very reassuring. They continued until she relaxed her shoulders. For the first time, Clara felt the strange thrill of doing something simply because she wanted to learn it. There was no employer watching, no clock counting down, no promise that she had to leave by a certain morning. When they returned to the ranch, the sun was low. Clara dismounted and handed Ethan the reins. "Thank you. Anytime." She hesitated. "Ethan." "Yes. I used to think staying meant losing my freedom." He waited. "Now I think being free means knowing I can leave and choosing not to." His expression softened. "That sounds right." They walked toward the house together. Clara opened the kitchen door and stopped. The table had been cleared. The wooden chair she had used for the past several days stood beside Ethan's place. She touched its back. "You really meant it." "What?" "When you said there wasn't enough room at the table before." Ethan looked at the chair. "There wasn't. And now?" "Now there is." Clara smiled. She walked to the stove and began preparing supper without being asked. Ethan rolled up his sleeves and started cutting vegetables. Their shoulders brushed once as they worked. Neither moved away. Later, when they sat down to eat, Clara looked at the wagon key resting on the table. Ethan noticed. "You can keep it." She picked it up. "I know." She placed it back beside her plate. "I just don't need it by the door anymore." Ethan looked at her. "You're sure?" Clara met his eyes. "I'm sure about staying tonight." He smiled. "Tonight is enough." Outside, the wagon stood beneath the cottonwoods, untouched. The road remained open. The key remained within Clara's reach. But for the first time in her life, she was no longer measuring her days by how soon she could leave. She was beginning to measure them by what she might build if she stayed. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of hooves moving softly beyond the window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the wooden chair beside the kitchen table and remembered. She had stayed. Not because Ethan had hidden the wagon key. Not because the road had been unsafe. Not because she had nowhere else to go. She had stayed because she had finally wanted to. Clara dressed and carried her coffee into the kitchen. Ethan was already there, standing near the stove. "Morning. Morning." He looked toward her. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected." He smiled. "Good." Clara sat in the wooden chair. Ethan placed a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of her. She looked at the food, then at him. "You made breakfast." "I can cook." "That's new." "I've been learning." Clara smiled. "From whom?" "A difficult teacher." She laughed softly. "I'm not difficult." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You hid my wagon key." "Fair." They ate together while sunlight slowly filled the kitchen. There was no hurry, no deadline, no packed trunk waiting beside the door. After breakfast, Clara went outside and found the wagon beneath the cottonwoods. She climbed into the driver's seat and looked down at the key in her hand. Ethan approached from the barn. "Going somewhere?" "No," she held up the key. "I was thinking." "About leaving?" "About the first time you took this." Ethan sighed. "I know. I was angry. You had every right. I thought you were trying to keep me here. I was trying to keep you from leaving before I could explain." Clara looked at him. "And what would you have explained?" Ethan rested one hand on the wagon wheel. "That I had started getting used to you." Clara smiled. "That sounds dangerous." "It was." He looked toward the house. "The first morning after you arrived, I heard you moving around in the kitchen. I didn't think much of it. And then I noticed the house smelled different. The meals were different. The table didn't feel empty anymore." Clara's smile faded into something softer. "Ethan," he continued quietly, "I had spent a long time thinking a quiet house was easier. I was wrong." Clara stepped down from the wagon. "You could have told me. I'm telling you now." She stood in front of him. "What do you want now?" Ethan took a slow breath. "I want you here." Clara waited. "Not for 3 days. Not until the next job comes along. Not because you owe me for anything." He looked directly into her eyes. "I want you here because I love having you beside me." Clara's eyes filled, but she smiled. "That sounds almost like a confession." "It is." She laughed through the tears. "You really are learning." Ethan reached for her hand, giving her plenty of time to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined. "I don't know what forever looks like," Clara whispered. "Neither do I. I still get scared." "I know. Sometimes I'll probably want to run." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll talk before you do." Clara looked down at their joined hands. "And you won't hide the key?" "Never again." She smiled. "Good." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass ring. A single wagon key rested on it. He placed it in her palm. "This one is yours." Clara stared at it. "Why?" "Because I want you to know you can leave whenever you choose." Her eyes lifted to his. "And if I stay?" Ethan smiled. "Then you'll know you stayed because you wanted to." Clara closed her fingers around the key. Then she stepped closer. Ethan's hand rose gently to her cheek. Their first kiss was quiet, warm, and unhurried. When they parted, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I think I want to stay. Tonight." "Tonight." She smiled. "And tomorrow." Ethan laughed softly. "That sounds promising." Later that evening, Clara opened her trunk and took out the last dress she had kept folded for the road. She hung it in the wardrobe instead. Then she moved the trunk completely away from the door. The wagon remained outside, ready whenever she might need it. But the key was no longer hidden in Ethan's pocket. It rested in Clara's own hand. At supper, she sat in the wooden chair beside him. Ethan placed the breadbasket between them. Clara looked around the kitchen she had once entered believing she would leave after 3 days. The shelves she had reorganized were still full. The repaired fence stood beyond the window. Her coffee cup sat beside Ethan's. Nothing about the room was grand. Nothing about it promised an easy life. But it was warm. It was lived in. And there was a place for her. Clara reached across the table and took Ethan's hand. You know, she said, I came here thinking 3 days would be plenty. Ethan squeezed her fingers. And now, Clara looked toward the open doorway, where the evening light fell across the floor. Then she looked back at him. Now I think I've finally found somewhere I don't have to leave just because I can. Ethan smiled. Outside, the wagon waited beneath the cottonwoods, its wheels dusty from the road, and its keys safely in Clara's possession. She could leave whenever she wanted. That was what made staying mean something. She had not been trapped. She had chosen. And for the first time in her life, Clara Bennett no longer measured home by how long she could remain there. She measured it by who would notice if she walked away, and who would still leave a place for her at the table.